Hello guys, Ben here, and today we are going to be starting a new series here on my channel, and I'm going to get through the book as much as possible. I'm not entirely positive how often these will be, but, err on the side of them being, I don't know. You know what, I'm not even going to try. So this is, of course, going to be from the book The King's Gambit by Grandmaster John Shaw. And I kind of just wanted to do this so I could get through and also look at all the lines he was talking about. Because I think that's important. And I think that's, necessary. Well, I think it'll help me get through it and help me understand what he's talking about. So the first line, so obviously we're looking at the King's Gambit, and we're diving into some of the sharpest variations immediately. So F4, E takes F, Knight F3, classical variation with 4H4, and we've got G4, Knight E5, Knight F6. And John Shaw says we go with Bishop C4 instead of D4. So we're going to focus on the main line here. And we'll look at D4 and why it's a little shaky, at least in his analysis. I apologize for the neighbors upstairs. So obviously White's threat is just simply taking this pawn right here, but with the bishop and not the knight. For example, I believe Knight C6 is worth a quick mention, but I'll go ahead and show that. D5 is his mainline move. Knight C6. Bishop takes F7. King E7. And then D4 at this point. And White should avoid playing this. Queen E7. Knight takes H8. Oops, not D6. That would be a mistake. Sorry about that. Delete that. And here we go. And this would definitely be better for black. And I agree with that. After Knight C6, 7, I'm a little skeptical. Well, actually, takes. I mean, it's possible. I think this is what he was looking at, and I kind of agree that, black has some issues. I would say White is probably positionally winning in this position. So anyway, back to the main line. D5. Also, another is 6, Bishop G7. Should be met with Bishop takes, King F8, Bishop B3, as opposed to, which I agree with, this looks perfectly okay for White. Actually, it looks great for White. As opposed to here, Queen E7, Knight takes, and again, just D5 works. So back to the main line, D5, E takes D. I agree with that move completely. In this section, I'm just going to cover section 1, I think, today, because there's quite a bunch of material. Yeah, okay. That's actually not that much, but we'll cover it all, and we'll and I'll save all of these and probably put the analysis in the description. So e takes d5. John Shaw recommends this is your absolute main line if you're playing as black, which is bishop g7. And it says definitely not a popular move, but it's a serious move. Then we've got bishop d6. Bishop d6. Oh, no, that's the main move. I'm sorry. And if I can pull it up, I may show you a game I played in this position. But bishop g7 is what Shaw recommends. d4. And so far I agree completely with all of this for white and to a degree with black. I actually prefer bishop d6 in this position for black as opposed to the bishop g7 move. Instead of either castles or knight c3, which I think he actually does cover a tiny bit. There are two moves to consider at this point. Knight takes d5 and castles, but knight h5 is actually the main move in this position. So at this point, I'll plug in the first move that he's going to go, knight d5, which if it's the first move, typically that's the one he would recommend. I'll plug in the main move here and the other move here. Okay, so knight takes d5 is the main move. It says rare but troublesome. Knight c3 with an exclam for white. I'm a little skeptical of why this gets an exclam because, you know, he says that the alternatives don't work in all likelihood. Doesn't want to give up the light squared bishop. Yeah, I agree with that. And after castling, the king is exposed likely to perpetual or worse. That said, knight c3 is definitely the move I would play, so, you know, I agree with his choice. And this is coming from somebody who plays the King's Gambit, you know, almost religiously. So when I saw this book, and I finally picked it up, you know, I'm interested in just going through this and, you know, maybe not memorizing, but getting familiar with the positions that I play as white, typically, and the positions that I play for black. Because I do face this a decent amount of times, and I play the Cunningham, which we'll get to eventually. Yeah. So knight c3, he doesn't like castles, and I kind of agree with him. So after knight c3, he gives a lot of analysis, and I'll actually go over it. So after castles, knight c6. There is an attempt to force a draw with f3 in this position. G takes f3. Bishop takes e5. D takes e5. And it was drawn pretty soon afterwards. So castles. Oh, sorry. After 11c6. Okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But even simpler would have been 11 queen takes h4. Yeah. It's h4. Bishop takes d5. Queen g3 check. King h1. And they likely repeated. Or it was likely a repetition in the analysis. So instead of 9 knight c6 after castles, 9 castles is also an option. Then bishop takes, queen takes, knight, what? Oh, whoops. Sorry about that. Delete that. But he's also saying that instead of knight c6, this is also an option, which leads to similar positions. After knight c6, another line is here. Takes, takes, takes. Does the queen take here? No, bishop takes. Rook takes f4. Okay. and then suggests that this would have been the correct move for black. And I kind of agree. Yeah, I'd rather have black in this position just because black has a bit more development and doesn't have any true weaknesses in the position. So anyway, knight c3. So after... Also, bishop takes d5 is not well regarded, you know, simply because it's just not a good idea. So anyway, back after knight c3. Knight takes on c3. Bishop e6 was a move chosen in the only game to reach this position. So, well, and I think he'll explain why it's bad, because bishop takes d5. Bishop takes d5, queen takes g4. Castles, bishop takes f4. Yeah, I don't like black's position here. Bishop back to e6. Queen g3. And I'm not even going to try and pronounce the names of these two players who played this game, but I definitely would not want to play as black in this position. Just because white has completed his development. He can castle either side safely. I'd probably castle kingside just because it's a little more direct. Or I just ram this castle queenside and ram the h-pawn down the throat. So after knight takes c3, bishop takes f7 check is the main line. That's... Okay. Bishop takes f7. And Shaw says that b takes c3 is much less fun after bishop takes e5, queen e2, queen e7, basically with equality. Because I'm assuming now you take here and the position is pretty dry. You know, it's just, it's a dry position. I can understand that. So, bishop takes, yeah, definitely go for the more interesting line. King f8, b takes c3, bishop takes e5, bishop b3. Okay, so 0 pawns for the knight. But, I mean, a natural line is stated. I think this is actually a drawish line, maybe? I'm not sure. Bishop d6. Castles. Queen takes h4. Bishop takes f4. Yeah, the black king is definitely way overexposed in this position. Bishop takes f4, rook takes f4, I would assume. Yeah, rook takes f4 check, king e8. And this just doesn't look pleasant for black. I would not want to play this as black. Yeah, that does not look pleasant. I mean, I don't even want to turn the computer... I'm not going to turn the computer on for this. But a line in this position, it's like... I don't know. And 15 king g7 g7? Okay, g7 loses at once to rook f7 check, king h6, queen d2 check. Yeah, that just doesn't look pleasant, because you either go here... How would I deal with that, though? Oh. Um, yeah, okay. So there, check. If he moves here, check there, moves here. Then I move here, and we win. We win the queen and the game because we're going to be playing this as our next move, and he can't defend against it. That's just one sample line. So if he moves here, it's pretty obvious that that's checkmate. So yeah, King G7 loses to that line, and I assume that's because this is somehow even worse. Okay. Okay, so he would move here, move here. I mean, you don't want to lose the queen here, here, here. Or better yet, just bring in the final piece. Then he goes here. I guess we can go bring this here. No, that wouldn't work. Sorry. Okay, so... You know, honestly, this just doesn't look pleasant. Yeah, this just doesn't look pleasant. Maybe bring... Either way, I think that's probably winning. I'm probably missing something, so... But King G8 just doesn't look palatable, I agree. So he suggested this with equality. So we're going to go back to move 8 for black, and instead of playing knight takes d5, we're going to look at castles. 9 castles for white. Instead of bishop takes f4, knight takes d5, forces white to surrender a vital bishop, bishop takes d5, queen takes d5, castles kingside, knight c6, and yeah, I agree, black has done okay for himself. I mean, he's still got a little bit of tension to deal with, but it's not that big a deal. So 9 castles. And let's go back to this. And white is now struggling. Whatever he plays, 12 knight c3, or 12 knight takes c6, b takes c6, c3, c5, and the main line was knight c3, queen d4 check. Queen takes d4, knight takes d4, I would assume, yeah. And that just looks... Yeah, black has done fine for himself. A little shaky in terms of... Well, it's still a complicated position, but white didn't really have compensation for the for the missing pawn. And that's from another game. Again, I'm not going to try and pronounce the names of the people or the town in this case. If I can pronounce them, I will. But in this case, I couldn't. So, in this position, 9 knight c3, knight h5 transposes to a note somewhere on the 9 knight c3 line, which goes like this. Trying to remember, did I even cover it? Enter knight c3. Oh, that's on the main line. That's somewhere. Okay. Anyway, 9 castles. 9 knight takes d5 is the main line that Shaw recommends. Oh, sorry. That's in section 2 that's in, so we'll be looking at that later. Knight takes d5. Knight c3 in this position, or not 9, I'm sorry, 10 knight c3, and this is a fighting move, as described by Shaw. Shaw really doesn't like taking here, and I kind of agree with him. You want to keep this bishop as long as possible because it's putting great pressure on this pawn especially, which means you could, if this pawn ever moves, say to here or here, you could then be on this square and you're taking advantage of the dark square complex, you're taking advantage of the light square weaknesses, you're taking lots of advantage just in this area in general. And in general, Shaw says, unless it's a forced win, don't take this and you'll be fine. Says after 10, oh yeah, that's after the bishop takes. I'm not really going to go over that. I'll put it in just for analysis sake. Queen takes d5, knight c3, queen d8. And white is hoping for equality after either capture on f4, and I don't think he quite achieves it. For example, rook takes f4. F5, which holds on to this pawn, and that's an interesting move, I agree. With bishop e6 and knight d7 likely to follow if white plays quietly. And black's bishop pair is just dominating, so white needs to strike now, but there are no punching lines available. And after bishop takes f4, knight c6 is pretty pleasant for black, and I would agree with that assumption. And again, it's mainly because the bishop is missing. So knight c3 instead. Black has a choice of exchange or retreat. So there are 2 lines he offers in this position. Knight takes c3 or knight b6, and he gives an exclam to knight b6. And I would agree, knight b6 is probably the better move. It hits the bishop, forces retreat, because you don't want to trade that bishop. But we'll look at the exchange first. Knight takes c3. He says it's the most natural move but not the strongest. B takes c3, f3. Definitely, this is something most players as white would generally not see, but King's Gambiters are like, whatever. Those pawns are doing nothing. Bishop e5 is the only move to have been tested in a game. But is an obvious concession by black. 12d takes e5, white will regain the pawn with a slight edge, especially after, say, this takes, and, I'm just making an assumption line. You'd probably want to keep the bishops, what bishop you do have. Yeah, and I'd say white is more than fine here. Though bishop e6 may be better. The point is that, it's not the strongest, so this is probably the strongest. So after f3, 11. Oh, and another alternative is queen takes h4. Rook takes f4. And then here, queen e7, a4, and a powerful initiative for white. So we go back a little bit on f3. So what's the right answer for white in this position? Shaw recommends queen e1 with advantage because it defends h4, so white will be the only one attacking. Obviously not g takes f3, but we'll look at that just for the sake of it. G takes f3, bishop takes e5, d takes queen takes h4, and black would have the advantage in this position. And I would agree with that wholeheartedly, though it's also a possible draw position because there is a perpetual here. So we go to queen e1, and he assumed that the following might be a possible continuation here. Bishop g5, queen d6, and g takes f3. And Shaw says it's not the best. Bishop g5 is not the best, but he thinks he may have missed something. 13 b5 is a response. What? Oh, sorry, that's in this position. Sorry, 13 b5 creates counterplay in a wild position. Knight c6 is safe and sound with the point that knight takes f7, queen g3 is a draw. So in this position, with the idea that this is a drawn position, and I would agree with that assumption. So bishop takes b5, saying that this is a piece sacrifice. That white must react boldly. His structure is not designed for slow plotting play. I would agree with that. And bishop e3 and c5 is what white really needs to avoid, because now black is attacking. So you definitely want to play something like this. Bishop takes e5. Black's king is so exposed that white must have a perpetual. Yeah. However, the position is messy, so good luck finding it. That's basically what he says. And yeah, that makes sense. D takes, queen c5, I agree with that. Why trade queens? Queen d4. Rook f2 is also fun. Because of g3, queen d4, g takes f2 check, king f2, queen takes b5, bishop f6, and the open g file allows a draw after rook e8, rook g1, king here, bishop g7 check, king e7, and then bishop f6 check. King f8, and it's a repetition, which is pretty obvious, but not this, not king e6. 23 c4. Ooh, that's beautiful. Oh, that is a shot. The flashy rook b1 also works. Yes, I love it. I love it. I'd probably play this. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, wow, that is amazing. Rook b1 also works because, so queen b6. We're going to go back to the c4 line, which is probably safest, but let's be honest, I would play this. I'll go ahead and just finish this out. We'll assume queen takes, and then let's move in this position. Would it be here? This is a very complicated position. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn the computer... Sorry about that. I'm going to turn the computer on. I'm just going to turn the computer on for this. Mating 2. Queen c4 check. Yeah, that's what I thought was the move. And then king d7, queen d5 is made. Okay. Just to show you. And this is also mate. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that queen c4 was the correct move. Yep. So queen c4 is the correct move, and after here, that's mate. And queen c4 here, that would be mate. So queen b6 is the move in this position. C5 and mate follows pretty quickly. Yeah, that's not a palatable position. So we have to go back to move 16 after... So queen here. So we go back, 16 queen d4, 16 queen takes b5, rook a b1, stopping queen b6, which would trade queens. And however, even so, it says Shaw says white can't quite win in this position unless black makes a blunder. For example, queen c6, bishop takes f6, or bishop f6, h6, queen e3, king h7, queen d3 check, king g8, and a repetition would follow here. So we have to go back to 14, move 14. I'm trying to see which one. Okay, 14 to f6 here. F takes g4. Bishop e6 with an exclam. The piece will still be there for the taking the next move. That's correct. White has various ways to get 3 pawns for the piece. Just one example will suffice, as this line is not critical. Queen f3, bishop d5, bishop c4, c6, bishop takes d5 check, queen takes d5, knight takes c6, queen takes c6, bishop d2. And white has 3 pawns for the piece. And I actually, and the game is roughly balanced. I say roughly. This is a balance for the King's Gambit. I'd venture to say that these pawns are more than compensation. Just because I'm a fan of connected passers, especially 3 connected passers, even if 2 of them are doubled. So we go back to move 12 in the main line, so after 12, queen e1, so queen e1, bishop takes e5. A highly suspect move is the black king loses its main supporter, but the alternatives are not impressive either. We can rule out f takes g2 because of rook takes f7. Wow, what a shot! Knight c6 looks principled. Whoops, sorry. Knight c6 in this position looks principled, but after bishop g5, F6. Oh, sorry, bishop F6. Knight takes F7. Ew, I would not want to play this as black. Also promising is knight takes C6. This crazy line. Knight takes C6. B takes C6. Oop, that is not the move. B takes C6. Bishop takes F6. Queen takes F6. G takes F3. Advantage white. So knight takes F7 is the move. Oh, yeah, also after bishop G5, I should note that queen D6 and 13 queen E8 both allow this move, which I agree you do not want to let be played. With even greater effect. Yeah, so I would agree with that statement. So you go back, bishop F6, knight takes F7, rook takes F7, G takes F3, G3, queen E4, and this is just starting to look like it's turning into a slaughter. Queen E4, queen E7, rook A E1, bishop takes G5, H takes G5, team G2. Only this move allows black to avoid disaster. Yeah, because black is definitely flirting with disaster here. For example, king G7, queen H4, queen F8, queen H6 check, king G8, queen F6, bishop H3, and G6 with an obscene advantage. So we have to go back to G2 and then rook F2. I mean, that's pretty obvious. King G7. Then you have bishop takes F7, of course. Queen takes, queen E8, rook B8, rook Fe2, and that's kind of just crushing. Bishop F5, queen takes F7 check, forcing the king to take, and then king takes G2, and white has an advantage. He's got 2 extra pawns. Yeah, that's not something I would want to play as black. Just on principle, I wouldn't want to play that as black. So we have to go back to move 12. So after move 12. Oh yeah, bishop. I'm actually gonna. So instead of the bishop takes E5 move, we've got bishop E6, which develops, and lessening pressure on F7, but there are traps awaiting black. If you play naturally, bishop takes E6, F takes E6. This is typical in the King's Gambit, is to actually play that. Knight takes G4, and yeah, black's position is kind of falling apart. So then we would go bishop takes D4 check, which is tempting but wrong. queen d6 is quietly accepts black's inferiority. that's a note I love to see grandmasters play. So bishop takes c takes d4, queen takes d4, which hits everything, but king h2, queen takes g4. Obviously not queen takes a1, because here queen e6 check, king h8, bishop here, and that's game. That is pretty much, that's where I would resign. White has a tremendous advantage here. Obviously not that line that I just showed you. So after queen takes g4, let me find that. Queen takes g4, g takes f3, rook takes f3, rook takes f3, queen takes f3, queen e6, check, queen f7. So we're in this position. Black is up a pawn and both kings look exposed, but in fact white's king is safe. Finding white's win may look tricky in the tactics, but the principle is simple. Keep the queens on while adding the bishop and rook to the attack as quickly as possible. Queen g4 check, queen g7, on queen g6, queen c8 check, king f7, queen takes f7, or queen takes c7 check with advantage. And I would agree with that statement thoroughly, so we need to go back to queen g7 instead. Bishop g5 blocks, interferes with the queen attacking this and gets another piece into the attack. Black's knight and rook cannot defend in time. For example, knight d7, rook e1. And now black would be equally dead after knight e5, queen e6 check, knight f7, bishop f6 with massive advantage. Or, where is it? Bishop g5. Or 22, rook f8, rook e7, with massive advantage for white. This actually looks like a position similar to how I was attacking in another King's Gambit game that I'll show when we get to the Falk Beer, because that's a fun game, though I've showed it on the channel before. I think it's definitely worth showing again. So we have to go back to move, etc. Bishop takes e5. Did I miss a move in here somewhere? Oh, no, sorry. Queen takes e5. Queen takes h4. Otherwise, bishop takes e5 would be pointless. Bishop a3 with an exclam. White picks off an exchange. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Or worse, I think, actually. So knight d7 is the move in this position. Not g3. Because, to put it quite frankly, Shaw says it's knave. Because rook takes f3, queen h2 check, king f1, queen h1 check, king e2, queen takes g2 check, king e3, and Shaw says white has an advantage. I would agree with that. White is attacking everything black is doing the amateur's mistake of attacking with only the queen and a far advanced pawn, but I don't think that's as big a deal as and white had to find 4 only moves, but the challenge was easily met. Yeah, so these were only moves, but I mean, really, a few of them were literally forced. And of course, we can't go, not here, but the previous move. Knight c6 doesn't work because queen f4, knight e7 is undone by rook takes f3 with advantage because of the pin on this pawn. So we have to go back so knight d7, we go to queen f4, knight b6, okay, targeting this bishop, which you don't want to lose. Bishop takes f8 here. Bishop b3 is also good. So this is an alternative if you want to preserve your bishop, because I mean, I personally would. I just don't see a reason not to. I mean, especially considering you're going to be playing this soon. So if here I'd play takes, if bishop took, I'd probably take that rook. Yeah, that just looks good. For example, the line I'm talking about is here, takes, 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 and white kind of does have an advantage. An extra exchange for the pawn, so it's definitely worth it. So knight takes c4, bishop takes f8, knight takes c4, rook takes f3. Just, you know, this idea that's been shown in this line so far. We could stop in this line. You could easily stop here, but let's just see a few more likely moves. Bishop f5, bishop h6, bishop g6, rook h3, which he says is simple but pleasing. If we look at another alternative, instead of bishop g6, knight d6, rook e3 is equally strong for white. It looks a little strange to be going off of this file, but it makes sense for if you play the King's Gambit. So rook h3, queen e7, and queen takes g4, and white should go on to win. So we need to go back and look at the 10. Knight b6, which I do agree is stronger for black. I also don't... I do agree that white is definitely getting an advantage after that exchange. And it's fairly simple to follow through if you're used to playing the King's Gambit or the Evans Gambit, because that bishop a3 move that Shaw showed is similar to a tactic shown in the a common tactic in the Evans Gambit for development. This is a troublesome move as far as white is concerned. Bishop takes f4 is the main line. I did just say don't swap the light square bishop for a knight, but sometimes there is no alternative. Of course, you know, you want to play bishop b3, but knight c6 would be pretty good for black. And it's particularly annoying as white is better against as white is better against all other moves, the only game to reach this position continue. Knight takes c6, b takes c3, rook takes f4, a5, a4, queen takes h4. In a Moen's Bauer correspondence game, and black retained the edge. So going back to knight b6, bishop takes f4, knight takes c4, knight takes c4. This is with the knights here, this is a position fairly common for King's Gambiters as well. There are many possible options, but equality is the general conclusion. For example, queen takes d4 check, queen takes d4, bishop takes d4 check, knight e3, and strange looking line, but it makes sense, and I agree, this makes complete sense for a King's Gambiter. White has easily enough compensation to level the game, but no advantage. And we looked at a few less popular options for black in a less popular line, but these are not bad variations. Bishop g7, and then knight takes d5 with also knight with castles instead of knight h5, which is the main move. White cannot force an advantage against these lines, but the play is definitely interesting, as you can see. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this first section of The King's Gambit by John Shaw. And, well, I would very much like to invite you to continue looking at the lines with me, and if you have any suggestions or alternatives, definitely mention them. If you have any ideas that you want to, go ahead and, let me know. So thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.